3D map. We are standing right here now alongside the road. This is a ridge that parallels the road, or is the road ridge. And so here's the corner of the property, and then the red is my access. Blue is water sources. And I'm going to put more. Every stand site will end up having a little water tank there at it, just a small one. I haven't got it all accomplished yet. This here is a 13-acre pollinator planting, and the reason I went with pollinator in here is because I've also layered clover below the 5 to 6 foot tall pollinator plants. And so when I have a lot of clover throughout this, but then I got the 42 different types of plant that I put in, plus the other diversity that has just naturally came in. So we talk more about year-round forbs. Biologists want to tell you that in the summertime, the forbs are the most important thing, period, for the deer browse. And during hunting season, it's actually the woody browse in the timber. And so I have my woody browse all the way around in a hinge cut edge. And then the yellow is an access or a travel corridor for the deer around behind that wall of woody browse. And so this wall, all the walls I make, I want to make them thick enough visually that the deer can't see through them so that they feel safe. And so I want that height of the cover to be above their eyes. So then the orange dots are tree stand locations I have in, and you'll see naturally I've picked inside corners and terrain features, and what I'm after is where several trails come together to make hubs. I want a hub at every stand location that I have, and most of my stand locations are going to be within 75 to 100 yards of where the buck I'm after is bedded, or it's going to be in that hub situation to where I have encouraged or forced a lot of the does to come together with hinge cut walls and security cover and food. So arrow indicating north, this is the west property line corners. It's 137 acres total. It was cut 4 years ago. The type of cutting was a diameter cut 16 inches at breast height in larger trees. And there was a lot of trees above 16 inches that they didn't want, like white pine they didn't take. I have a few of them. Actually, I got a stand up 50 feet in one of those white pines back here. It's a big observation stand I have. But and then they left some big beech trees, but pretty much anything with value they took. And then I came in after that, probably 4 months later, and I hinge cut for 13 days that year. Then I gave it 2 years, and this winter, last December and January, I hinge cut for 12 more days in here.
What time of year were you hinge cutting?
Whenever I had time. It's what it ends up being.
There's
right?
a lot of conversation about that.
Yes.
What are your feelings about time of year?
Well, that's huge conversation, right?
Yeah,
and so
yeah.
It's September 12th today. I have a seasonal job just because of those conversations people's had, because I'm mainly hinge cut, right,
Yeah.
guy. But I'm going to 2 clients at the end of this month, 22nd of September, 23rd, 24th. Whoops, there's my mic. I'm not a professional. So I'm going to those guys. They're having me at that time because what they've seen in the past, when I cut, all the deer in the area flock in.
Yeah.
They're overpopulated on deer in that area.
Yeah.
And so when I cut, they flock there. And so 2 years in a row, we done it in August there, and he's seen the drawing power of it. And so now he's having me there the week before season, right? Mm-hmm. And so on this property,
just the opposite of what
everybody says. And this guy kills big deer, right?
Yeah.
But he's in a unique situation where he's overpopulated and there's hardly any woody browse. And I'll tell you, the main thing I cut there is buckthorn. All the biologists say they don't eat buckthorn, but you'll hear that over and over about different types of vegetation. And what I've learned is if there's a lot of that plant in an area where they grew up at, they eat it. And they're going to eat it 3 times more than deer in other areas that don't grow up with that type of vegetation, right? Beech trees, when I cut a beech out in New York, the root sprouts that come up, they devour them in the wintertime, right? If I do it here, they hardly touch my beech.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've driven around northern Michigan a lot, and beech dominates the understory of forests up there because the deer don't prefer them.
Well, this timber here was 40% beech.
Yeah.
And I've cut thousands, right? And I'm not going to cut every beech tree, but the thing, I love to hunt out of a beech tree. They hold leaves late in the year. They got all kinds of limbs. They're limby down low. They make really good scrape trees. I could take the top out of it and those bottom limbs to do the canopy. They make a good bedding site, but very, very low timber value. And so I like timber value. I like making money while I'm asleep.
Yeah.
And that's one way you can do it. And if you will hinge cut your junk trees, the good trees will grow up to 300% faster for 8 to 10 years. So I can get 30 years of growth in a tree in 8 years, right? And so talk about board foot. I mean, there's no other. You have to get sunlight in the timber to grow trees. You have to get sunlight in to grow deer food.
I always say you have to cut trees to grow trees.
Well, that's it. Yeah, that's the right way to say it.
Cut trees to grow deer. So the main thing you got to do is cut trees.
And if you and logging's the best way to do that because you're going to get the biggest canopies gone, right? And you're going to make money at the same time. So, but after you log, you need to do some type of cleanup or taking the other junk out, and that's what I was talking about with the number of hinge cut trees I'd done, right? And so a guy would say, man, I don't want you to hinge cut the whole property. Well, what I've learned over the years is, I ask everybody when I go there, what are your goals? What do you want on your place? And I started getting guys saying, I just want a lot more deer. I just want a lot of deer. Well, the way we do that is we hinge cut your whole entire property.
Yeah.
And my goodness, right?
Yeah.
And so the theory, there's all these different theories out there. And so I talk about a taxidermist in Illinois, world-renowned taxidermist in Illinois that just taxidermied, Eric Kibler's his name. The world record buck that was killed in Illinois 3 years ago, he done that one. But what I'm saying is he's got a food plot right beside his shop. And I said, if I hinge cut along the back of this food plot, you're going to have deer living right there. And when you go to hunt, you're going to have to go past this. He says, that's okay. I said, well, why you feel that way? He says, I love seeing wildlife. And if I can enjoy it 365 here, and I'm only going to hunt possibly a week, 7 or 8 days, if everything's going good, well then, he says, I want year-round enjoyment. And so it's more important to me for you to go ahead and pull them up here to the front.
Everybody has to make that decision. I got a chapter in my book called What Do You Want?
Yeah.
If you don't know what you want when you start out, then you're just randomly going to try different things.
Yeah.
But if you know what you want, if you know that you want to both grow timber and deer.
And not everybody does.
There's a compromise.
That
you have to face, because it's not going to be optimized deer property. Optimized deer property doesn't have a single tall tree that doesn't produce a nut or something that they eat, and even that is overvalued.
And I run into a lot of clients that's what they want, right?
Yeah.
They say, I don't care about the tree value whatsoever, Jim.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't hardly cut that. That's hey, it's my property. Yeah, I do it. They hired me for the day. I'm going to do exactly what they want, right?
So then if they want nothing but a deer property, that's all it's for.
Right. 100%.
Cut. And if you ever have to ask, how much more should I cut? More.
Yeah.
Just keep cutting, because these trees limit the deer's food
But back
availability.
to, I just as soon had the logger come in and take that big tree out, so it's not in our way.
Yes.
Because it's not going to hinge and stay alive most of the time. The big ones aren't. I'm saying over 14-inch trees
Yeah.
typically.
Yeah.
Depending on species, elm, a few of them hickories, but back to, I just assume they get it out of the way and then we can move around on the property easier and faster
Yeah.
and more productive.
That's what I tell everybody, and that's what I did on my 43 acres 6 years ago. The first thing I did the first year is come in and took out 1,200 trees on 43 acres.
Yeah.
And since then I've probably cut 4,000, hinge cut 4,000 more.
Right.
So it's so thick you can hardly walk through it in a lot of
But
places.
there-
But I make sure that the deer can
But there's
move around.
many of the
Yeah.
good mass-producing trees that, like you mentioned, you have to cut trees to have good trees. You get into a white oak
Yes.
stand,
Yep.
and I'll cut a tree, and it'll just snap off, and I'll look at the growth rings
Right.
in it, and that white oak might be 60 years old
yeah.
and 7 to 8 inches across, right? And the wood is so hard, it will not hinge cut.
Yes.
Even
Well,
though,
especially red oaks. Yeah.
right, red oak's even more, but
Yeah.
a white oak is a great hinge cut tree
Yeah, they
if it's
sure
a
are.
fast
Yeah.
growing tree, right? And you need to thin them no matter what.
Well,
Hard
if you
maple's
want
got to
mass
be
production,
thin.
you have to have an oak savanna.
Yeah.
In other words, the trees have to be separated by 20 or 30 yards from each other.
Big pasture
To have
oaks,
an
a
oak
big,
savanna, and then they'll reach out their limbs and they'll grow, the swamp oaks will grow 1-inch diameter acorns. But when you have a stand where the trees are all straight up like these trunks here, they're almost useless.
Right, they don't have the canopy for it. They can't
don't
produce it. Yeah.
acorns. They don't get enough light.
Well, and then, I mean, back to some of them genetically don't even produce acorns, right?
Yeah.
And so you could think you got a beautiful tree there, and if you don't pay attention, it might not have produced anything
Right,
for you
but
for
you
years.
take a tree like that little skinny tree right there, if it was younger, lay it on its side for the next 10 years, it'll be producing food year round for
Right.
deer.
Oh yeah. No.
In browse, because they love white oak browse. Yeah.
American elm, black gum, the white oak. I mean, all those are just perfect hinge cut food trees.
Yes. Yes. Food trees.
So, but back to, you can see this has a lot of terrain features on it. There's 5 little points here that come out to where we're standing here. This area right here is a natural hub, and natural hubs are almost always, majority of them are in bottoms, unless you're up on top of a ridge and you got a lot of fingers that come together, you can get a natural hub. But this area right here, which is straight down the hill from where we're standing, it's at the beginning of the property, and because of terrain features, it is what it is. And a lot of guys say, oh, at the beginning of the property, you don't want to be doing anything because you got to walk through that you've done. And that's what I was kind of bringing up about Eric Kibler and having me set the property up to where he's hinge cutting up front. Well, what I've learned in 4 years, and by me coming out here last December, January, doing those other 12 days of hinge cutting is I've got way more deer naturally bedded in the wintertime up along the front of my property than I ever imagined that would happen. And the main reason is I have a thick property that has my browse available during the winter, and these other properties don't. And so these deer will elongate their home range and just
to overlap on this. Yeah.
Just to take advantage of part of what the benefits that it, maybe it's just a certain time of the year. But what I'm getting at is I hadn't developed this very much, but I knew it was a natural hub system. And so I'm 4 years in on this property, and within 2 to 3 more years, I'm hoping to have as much activity up here to where I can just hunt the very front of my property instead of digging in. How I've hunted all my life is public land. 90% of my hunting has been public land, and I'd always go to the best spot. Well, now when I got my own ground and I can build the best spot, right, on the property, and so, I've studied all these big buck killers, right? And a lot of guys do it slightly different, And one guy do it the 3rd week of October, the next guy does it the 1st weekend of season, whatever. They come up with their methods. Mine has always been terrain features during the chase phase. I started out late season food, and then I moved killing them, and then I moved into terrain features.
So this is really an unusual map. How'd you come up with it?
So, when I was in the Marine Corps Infantry, we traveled over to Okinawa, Japan, in the jungle over there, and they had a competition for the best infantry squad in the Marine Corps, and so we went through, I think, 3 competitions and won those. And we got to the very last competition, and so when you sit there and point at a little piece of paper and try to show terrain features on a little piece of paper back in the day, it was impossible for anybody to understand it, especially if you got 30 guys there wanting to know what's going on at one time, right? And so over the years, I've just kind of developed it a little more. 15, 20 minutes, a lot of guys can understand the big picture that you're after. And you know, terrain features are just so incredibly important for harvesting bucks during the chase phase of the rut. And
well, I'll tell you, I've walked a lot of properties on habitat days and stuff, and they start out usually with a seminar, and they show you an aerial view of the land, and it doesn't do for me what this is doing right now. I have a feel. I can see that valley going down right here. We're standing right up here, and I can see how it drops off all the way around it. And I can picture, and I'm sure I can see little pieces, although there's a lot of leaves on of these ridges coming out. So I got a really good picture of what we're going to see as we walk around the property.
so when I got this place,
Much better than an aerial.
up here on the property line, you could stand here, and because of the terrain features, see deer walking on this ridge back here, right? And so I had no interest at all of hunting the front of the property because I had no security cover, no reason for a mature animal to be up here, right? And so just over time, I mean, we'll get in here in some places you're not going to be able to see 20 yards, right? But I still have my access, which is very critical. You know, any place you put in a trail, wildlife's going to follow that trail. You're developing an edge there, and naturally just diverse vegetation, a variety of different stuff's going to come in. And
an interesting thing I've observed is when you make a trail through heavy cover like that, and the deer use it, they keep it open.
Yeah.
Because they browse their way through it.
Yeah.
And if a log falls across or something, all of a sudden the vegetation got that trail closed off in a few months in the summer.
It's every year.
Yeah, every year.
When you cut a property, there's a guy needs to jump in and start doing his maintenance immediately. This property was cut hard. The loggers actually rutted it up. I had 3-foot ruts in here from the skidders, right?
Yeah.
I couldn't drive a 4-wheeler around this property. And so because I couldn't get to the spot to do my work, I was carrying gas can and oil jug and chainsaws, you know, 300-400 yards back in there and trying to do some work, right? And so I ended up having to buy me a dozer. And but yes,
now, do you keep that dozer here, or you have trailer it around to your other property?
Trailered it around.
Yeah.
I had it here until Friday, and then I moved it over to, so I have another 134 acres a half mile down the road. You guys probably drove right by it when you came in. But there's a 40 acre between the two pieces that I don't have. But
Well, maybe someday you'll connect that, huh?
well, that would be a dream, right? But you know how it is. Property next to you, you'll get a chance at it maybe one time in your lifetime, and it's probably going to be expensive because they know
it's
that.
It's worth a premium to do that, to have continuity between your two properties. It's worth paying a premium, and people know
and it would give
you're
me,
going to be paying a premium compared to what the market is.
And it would give me way better access in a couple of situations, and give me some options, and even give me a house building site on this ground. There's really just not much flat ground up here at the front where a guy can do anything like that. But
so is that a stand location?
All the orange.
All the orange marks.
So this one right here, kind of a funny deal. The first year I hunted it, I hunted for 11 days. I mentioned to you I hunted 2 days all day long and didn't see one deer. I hunted 2 half days and didn't see a deer. And so the third day of gun season, I'm sitting up here kind of feeling sorry for myself a little bit, thinking, man, I've done better than this on public ground, you know? And I thought, well, I'm going to go hang a new stand and see. And so I come down this property line, and there's a hub right here. But anyways, I came through that, got up here to a pine tree. I had 4 climbing sticks and a chain on stand, put them in there in that pine tree, and the stand faces east for an afternoon so I wouldn't be blinded by the sun. I went to sit down, I heard something, turned around, and there the 171 was walking right to me, right? So I shot him, he come over, died 20 yards from the tree. As I videoed him, you know, closing his eyes or whatever when he was done, basically. And then later I looked at my camera right there. He come through there at 11:30 that day. Then I got a picture of me coming through there at 3:15 to hang the stand. And then I got him on the four-wheeler as I come back out at like 4:30 or something,
wow.
right? 22 inches wide, 171 inches. But you don't have to have a lot of deer to have big rack mature bucks, right? And so that's one thing that Dr. Deer James Crow really impressed on me. I thought, you know, back in the day, a lot of numbers was an important thing. And it takes numbers, you know, like, I don't know if it takes 20-year-old bucks to get to one 6.5-year-old buck, you know, as far as, but I mean, all he has to do is live live.
Well, I know in Michigan I've studied the data and the ratio's a lot lower than that. It's, you know, if you look at the harvest data, a 5.5-year-old buck is extremely rare.
Yeah.
1 in 200 or so, if I remember right. Yeah.
And so, I mean, it takes a lot of numbers to get there, usually, it seems like. But the more numbers you have, the more food you need to have.
Hunting pressure. Yeah.
But this property has natural carrying capacity just because the sunlight's into it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So they are for sure getting everything they need year-round. So last December I was in here cutting, and I put out the cutting back cameras, and so then I had 4 bucks.
These cell cameras?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
4 bucks in here over 140 now, right? One of them should be this year. I haven't got a picture of him yet this year. It should be 180, you know. I'll tell you a little hunting story about that buck that I killed the first year. We came out, I had one stand set up, and I had a redneck box blind on the property, and that's all I had going into the first season. So Halloween night, we came up here, I took a little tractor and I drug my redneck blind out here on the ground and set it right there, right?
Yeah.
And then drove the tractor back over there and parked it at the edge of the field and walked out there and got in it. So we had a 30-mile-an-hour wind and it started snowing. So me and my buddies sitting in here together, right? Again, first time I ever hunted the property. And that buck I killed came out of this inside corner of the field over here at 3:30 in the afternoon after we just put that box blind on the ground right there, and was out there for 2 hours browsing, walking around in this corner over here.
Wow.
He went to leave the field. He started bucking and kicking and jumped around in a big 50, 60-yard circle over there playing. I never seen anything like it, right?
Wow.
And I'm sitting there, we're taking pictures of this at 200 and some yards away, right, watching all this. And I was telling my buddy, I said, I'm going to have a stand in that corner tomorrow evening. And I'm waiting on him, right? So then I went and put that stand in there, and a little 4-pointer come out that evening was it, right? And so anyways, I seen him one other time coming out of the end of this flat ground here, and that's the reason I went ahead and improved this here. It's more of a food situation, then I killed him right there, but yeah.
Outstanding.
You want to do some walking and then come back?
Yeah, let's do. Yeah.
We can come back and do some more.